Well, in order to be ready for the advent of open banking, banks first need to understand what the regulations are, which sounds so obvious, but they're really detailed and they're not finished. So it's still going to take some time for that to fully crystallize. Secondly, I'd say that banks have to invest in their, if you like, internal capabilities, and that takes two forms. One, have they got the right architecture? Can their systems interoperate both internally and externally? And two, have they got the right people? This is not just a bit of technology that asks a different question about how you run a process. It's a fundamentally different way of building a strategy for a bank. The main implications of the combination of PSD2 and GDPR are complexity, complexity, and complexity. And God, as they say, is in the details. So here's an area where you've got to have a very clear policy and strategy. What data do you want to collect from customers? Must you collect from customers as a quid pro quo in order for you to deal with them? Because that, if you get that right, that can simplify things greatly. What's the minimum standard? What's the minimum you must do to comply with GDPR? And ultimately, how does that then begin to play into your defined strategy in respect of providing or accepting data through PSD2? I think the key implications of artificial intelligence for banking are going to be take the form of a much more fundamental revolutionization or transformation of the banking model itself. Today we're living in a world where somewhere between 95, maybe 96, 97% of transactions or decisions around, if you like, complex data sets can be fully automated. But AI moves you much closer to the 99 percentile. And that ultimately makes it a realistic possibility that you as a consumer or a customer in business will spend the vast majority of your time in whatever channel dealing with an AI. The impact that the technology giants have already had on banking can't be understated because they're reshaping the relationship between the consumer, the technology, the hardware, and indeed the data. The banks will have to face up to the reality that they may not be the strong brands in the future that they are today, that they may not have sovereignty over that customer relationship, and that ultimately they'll be competing for a smaller share of wallet. And that's a pretty big challenge for them because hitherto their models have depended upon them cross-selling and providing a one-stop shop service to all the customers who essentially start with them at the age of 9 and leave them at the age of 90. I think that world is coming to an end. Challenger banks can have a huge impact on banking, but only if they are determined to actually compete with the big banks. If they're content to focus on a very small niche, they'll make very little difference to the big banks, and that's the truth. Because I don't think in the next 5 to 10 years we can expect the big brand players in the UK to go anywhere. They're not going to sit back and let change happen and threaten their business model benignly, and they have millions of customers and they have revenue. So challenger banks are going to have to pick their fights, but I also think it's true to say that they're unlikely to get customers from each other. It stands to reason that challenger banks are only going to be successful if they find a way to attack the biggest banks in the UK market. And they're formidable opponents, but I still think that's what we're here for. I attended Market Forces conference today because it's a great opportunity to hear from other voices. When you run a business, it's very easy to listen to your investors, listen to your customers, and listen to your own employees. But you're pretty much in the trenches a lot. So once in a while, it's nice to lift your head up, listen to some other people, hear some other ideas, and also get a sneaky peek at what the competitors are thinking.